Depictions of queer sex in media in that way is usually salacious. It's usually my name is Queen. I'm the founder of Mixed Vixen. Thanks for coming back for another video, and if you are new here, hey boo, I'm happy to have you here. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite shows, P-Valley, but we're specifically going to talk about season 2, and I'm talking about this season as if you have seen season 1 and season 2 already. So if you have not, pause this video and I don't know, go get your life and then come back, because I'm talking to the ones that know, okay? Created by Katori Hall, this series is an adaptation of Hall's play, Pussy Valley. Can I say pussy on YouTube? And follows several people who work at the strip club in the Mississippi Delta. The Pink is a popular strip club in Mississippi where intrigue abounds when the mysterious Autumn is welcomed by Mercedes the dancer and Uncle Clifford, the club's discreet owner. The show airs on Starz. We're in the 2nd season. I started watching the show because my mother's always recommending TV shows to me, being her very into television. So she's like, oh, it's this new shows on Starz, you should watch it. And I watched it and I've been hooked on it ever since. It's my show. I really enjoy the show. I was thinking about doing like a review of the show, but I felt like that would be way too long. So I figured I'd talk about things that I really enjoyed about season 2 and things that I think needed a little more work, and give my analysis on those things rather than go through the whole season and everything that happened within an episode. Let's start with talking about P-Valley and this portrayal of queerness. I really enjoyed how this show inserts black queerness into the story. And it's not inserted into the story for scandal. It's not inserted into the story for shock value, although some things shock straight people. But it's all purposeful and very threaded in the storytelling, and not just thrown in there carelessly, as I see happen on a lot of television shows. But that's something that I don't think we see on television in this way. Usually queerness, especially in black media, is thrown in there to be something scandalous. It's thrown in there to be like, to focus on people being on the down low. It's thrown in there to focus on just the sex and not the lived experience of these people. And P-Valley just does an amazing job of not making queer black people accessories to the lives of the straight or the cis people around them. One amazing example of that is just seeing how Uncle Clifford is the owner of the Pink, the owner of the strip club. It's just really great to see how they show community and show that Uncle Clifford, this black queer person who is very gender fluid. Most people would say non-binary, but they don't identify as that on the show. But this person who is very gender fluid, who exists very femme, but still wears their beard and mustache and like all of these things, is the pillar of this community, to the point where people with power in that community consult Clifford to see what the next move should be for this little town in Mississippi. We generally do not see black queer characters, especially black dark-skinned queer characters, in this like level of authority to be the pillar in the space in that way. Also to see that Uncle Clifford is the safe haven for a lot of these black women who work at the Pink. For a lot of these black straight people depend on Uncle Clifford. And it's kind of bittersweet because we see how much they give to the community, but we don't always get to see them receive all of that. And I do think that expresses and shows the dynamic in a relationship in black people amongst the black straight people and amongst black queer people. So I do think that the story does a really good job to show that, to show how much, as a Black queer person, you go hard for Blackness, for your community, for the people around you, even though you will never receive that amount of care and love back from the people you're in community with. So I do like seeing, although it is not a great, an amazing thing to see, I do think it's really great that that is showcased in the story. There's an episode that my homegirl did on her YouTube channel, Diamond Styles, of her and other trans folks who are talking about this dynamic and about how they have been the pillars or mothers of community, and mostly they are talking about within queerness, but they are also people who are pillars of the communities that they live in, period, and talking about that dynamic, and also talking about other things that because of my cisness I was not able to identify. So I do want folks to see that video and get that perspective too. I don't want to speak on an experience that I have not lived, but I do want to refer you to that video. They have a really good panel and a really good discussion, so I will have the link below to that if you want to check that out. Other pieces of queerness that I really enjoyed in P-Valley is that they show queerness and its intimacy. That intimacy exists. I think a lot of people think about queerness and then we go straight to sex because we make queerness all about who you have sex with or who you want to have sex with, when queerness is a whole lot more than just that. So I like to see Uncle Clifford and Little Murder. Even the sex scenes in season 2 are very different from the sex scenes in season 1. There's a huge level of intimacy within those. You see the love, you see the connection, you see people pouring into each other. Depictions of queer sex in media in that way is usually salacious, it's usually a scandalous plot point. It's not usually something that is like handled with care in this way. One of the scenes that had a lot of people talking, and even if you don't know P-Valley, you know of the scene. So there's a scene where Lil Murder and Big Teak, who are both, you know, gangsters in the life, been to prison together, very, very masculine presenting Black men, also Black men who fit the archetype or the stereotype of a white supremacy says Black men look like, and that's it. There's a sex scene amongst these two characters, and it is the most sensual, loving sex scene that I have seen.
You my one nigga that gonna be alright.
I've watched this sex scene more than once, and not even because of the sex. It was just so much like passion and emotion and feeling in the scene, and it was amazing for me to see this on screen. And when I have conversations with my friends about it, a lot of them felt uncomfortable, and not because of the sex, and they couldn't quite put their finger on, like, I don't know, I felt a little uncomfortable, you know, whatever. And I'm like, it's just because the first time you've seen intimacy between masculine men. We don't even get to see that in a non-sexual platonic way amongst men. And now we're seeing this. We're seeing two men kiss on each other and love on each other in ways that we've never seen it before. I really thought that that scene was very revolutionary. And outside of how uncomfortable it made straight people, and it made straight people very uncomfortable because within that, it humanized those characters. It humanized masculine men being intimate in ways that many of us are not even used to seeing on a platonic level from cishet men. Also, I think another reason why I made so many it made so many people uncomfortable was because these men look like the archetype of what white supremacy says black men are supposed to be like. And a lot of black men follow that archetype. And if this type of cishet black man can do this, can be intimate, can have sex with men with this amount of intimacy, it's not forced. It's not what we see when it's like prison movies. It's not like what we see on The Wire where it's like just something sexual. You knew that it was something more than that. And if that is something that exists from people who look like this, people who we usually stereotypically wouldn't say was gay, then that means my mans could be gay. That means gay is like in the room with me. Like, that means that queerness is right next to you. I think it's really important that we dismantle what queerness looks like, and this very intimate, sensual scene does a lot of that. It dismantles what queerness looks like. In terms of men, there's a femininity to being gay when there's a spectrum as to what queerness looks like for men. And it also shows us that there's a capability for men to be intimate and tap into their feelings and express those feelings. There's an exchange also in this season between Little Murder and Big Teak. So just for folks who may not remember or whatever, because like I said, if you hear, it's because you watch these episodes where Big Teak finds out that Little Murder has someone else, and that someone else is Uncle Clifford, right? Finds that out, is heartbroken by it, but they have a conversation, and we found out later why Big Teak was making amends to, you know, the people in his life, because in that episode Big Teak did unalive himself. But there's a scene where Lil Murder and Big Teak are eating together at a restaurant, and it's basically Big Teak asked about Lil Murder's, you know, his new boo, and they talk about that, and Big Teak tells him, you know, I forgive you. And I thought it was really big to see that, for Big Teak to be hurt, for Big Teak to know that he has lost his love. He loves Lil Murder, that he has moved on to someone else but is happy, and for him to say I forgive you, so that this isn't a chip that grows on Lil Murder's shoulder, but also to show kind of this level of maturity and this level of understanding that I know exists, because I have dated these type of stereotypical archetype of black men.
Where the hood niggas at? Where's the hood niggas at? I'm looking for the hood niggas. Come on, come with me.
So I know that exists, but we don't often see that in media. And to see that amongst two men is incredible.
You forgive her.
I really, really love what they did with those characters, with this little bit that we got to know about Big Teak, because he was only in this season, and like I said, within the season they unalived themselves. It was just amazing the huge impact they added to the show by adding Big Teak. It was just like, loved it. I also like the way in this season P Valley challenged our ideas of gender roles, of masculinity and femininity within queerness. This is something that I always have a big beef with, how there's heteronormative ideas in queerness where it's like the femme, the masculine, who's the bottom, who's the top, who is the man, who is the woman in a relationship. All of this weird stuff that I naively didn't think exists in queerness, but it does. So it's great to see Uncle Clifford, a person who is visibly, for the sake of my language, sometimes language is limited, who is visibly trans in terms of not existing the way cisness is supposed to present. So here's a person who does not pass, and this is a person who I don't think is trying to pass as woman, obviously, because they keep the what you call it, beard, mustache situation, they keep it snatched. But obviously this person isn't trying to exist in a binary. And I think that also, especially for me and the limits that I have within my cis existence, to see that allows me to understand that also transness, or the binary and its limits, with just only thinking about gender in a binary way. Uncle Clifford is like the visual representation of that. I also love that there was a scene where little Clifford's grandmother was going to the hospital. Ambulance takes to the hospital. She was really, really sick from COVID, and someone misgendered Uncle Clifford. And so although Uncle Clifford is Uncle Clifford, they use a lot of she, her pronouns. And one of the paramedics referred to Uncle Clifford as he, and Lil Murda was like, no, she. And that was fucking dope. That was dope. Because even within that, at this point, we know he's struggling with everyone knowing their sexuality and stuff like that. But it was just really great to see them make sure that the person they love, Uncle Clifford, was not misgendered in that way. So that was dope. Another thing that I really liked that this show does with queerness, like I said, with gender roles and kind of how heteronormativity still exists in queer spaces and relationships, which I actually have a video planned on that, but I'm still doing some research. But I like that there was a scene where Uncle Clifford and Little Murder was about to do the do. Not about to do the do, doing the do. Up until this point, Uncle Clifford is the bottom. I hope you know what I mean by that. And Little Murder is the top. But in this scene, Little Murder is the bottom. Little Murder, the most masculine situation in the person if you are going by the binary. The gangster, the person who you would never assume is a receiver. Clifford, who is femme, who, and for, you know, the way that patriarchy works, you assume the femme is always receiving, even in queerness. And it was interesting for me to see people, mostly on Twitter, so surprised that Uncle Clifford was topping. And I'm like, why? You know, it exposed a lot of heteronormative ideas that even exist in queerness, and we can't address these things if we're not exposing them. And P-Valley did a great job of exposing it. So I like that. I really, really like that. And my last thing on queerness, the amazing job that P-Valley did with queerness in this show. I'm saying amazing, and I'm not saying that there's no faults, you know, that there's no issues. Nothing is going to be perfect, but if there's things that you found that were not so perfect about queerness in P-Valley, I would like to know those. So if you could put those in a comment, that'd be dope. So do that. I would like to say that I really enjoyed how they portrayed queerness in the South. I am from the Bronx. I'm a New Yorker. I'm an up north mofo, right? And most of my depictions of the South are from visiting and from media. And we already know that the media's depiction of the South is not great. I am not from the South, and I noticed that there's a lot of ignorance that I have towards the South because of what is fed to me via media about the South, right? And I'm trying to do a better job at dismantling that, especially because most black people in the United States live in the South, right? Y'all are the majority, so I need to get my ignorance together. The show is set in Mississippi, and I've never been to Mississippi, but my ideas and depictions of the South is really that queerness does not exist in these places. Queerness only exists in cities. Queerness only exists in New York, San Francisco, big cities. The South is where everyone escapes from so that they can exist freely and be queer. And to see Uncle Clifford freely exist in this town is amazing. I know that Uncle Clifford is not the only person who exists that way. And it is important that those people's stories are told. Not every queer person, not every queer black person who is born in the South leaves. I have friends who live in the South, openly trans, openly gay, in the South. If most black people are in the South, most queer black people are in the South. And although I don't have much to say about whether these depictions are correct or not, it was really nice to see it. It was very helpful for me. I am doing the work to dismantle my ideas about the South, especially black people from the South. It was just nice to see this person exist this way in this small town of Mississippi and not be harmed. So those are the things that I really, really enjoyed about the show. Now I want to get into some of the things that I think on the show just need a little more work. It was really weird for me to see this show in rural ass Mississippi with a storyline that is about a strip club, sex workers. There's always a beauty hierarchy, especially when it comes to strip clubs and my understanding of strip clubs. And it wasn't until season 2, the episode Mississippi, where they give us the background of her life, that it was a really great episode where they do this Cinderella kind of backdrop to let us know how she became a stripper. But it's interesting that that's the only episode where colorism is overtly stated within the whole 2 seasons of this show. I don't know if it's an oversight on purpose or if it's the typical oversight that I tend to notice with colorism, period, where people are so embedded in the system of colorism that they don't even know how to talk about it. They don't even know how to have conversations about it. I don't know, but it was just weird. It was also weird for when they finally do bring up colorism, overtly colorism. It was when Mercedes was in high schools and the guys were making fun of her for being dark skinned, and you can see that she's not really confident and all of this stuff. And then that's where she meets her boyfriend Derek, who we learned in the present time he is a physically abusive partner. But when they were in high school, of course she doesn't know that. Derek is a white person, and he tells her she's beautiful and fills her up and all this stuff, and she falls in love with him, and it turns out he's an abusive person. It's just kind of whack that when they finally do overtly talk about colorism, it's like a plot point as to why she is with an abusive person. It's a plot point as to why she is even with this white boy, because we see all the black boys making fun of her because she's darker skinned. So now when this the white boy in the school is now interested in her and telling her she's beautiful and lovable and all of this stuff, then now she's with this white person. Now she's with this white abusive person. That could have been expressed. It's almost as if only she loved herself, she wouldn't be in those situations. And I say over and over again, dark-skinned people cannot love themselves out of colorism. Colorism is systemic, and I don't like when we keep it as colorism is kind of like a preferential choice and people prefer someone who looks lighter. No, it is a systemic thing. The quality of life of a light-skinned person is higher than the quality of life of a dark-skinned person, and there are facts that say that. So I'm always very annoyed when the conversation stays on that basic level, I wasn't pretty stuff. It's whack. When we do hear colorism in this show, and this is mostly for season 1, but when we do hear about colorism in the show, like I said, it's not overtly said, but it's just dark-skinned people pointing out someone is yellow or light. So it's just dark-skinned people reacting to the knowledge of their mistreatment because they're darker than this other person. That isn't a true depiction of colorism, and it just makes dark-skinned people just seem like we're just bitter people because we're not chosen to be on a poll first. I just wish we did better with that and stop keeping these colorism conversations basic. If you're not going to do any of the work of it, then just shut up and keep it out the story. Like, I don't understand why that keeps happening. And then it's interesting because yes, most of the women who are in the strip club are not light skinned, and it was interesting that the character Autumn in season 1, she's kind of what brings us to Chuckalisa. She becomes a stripper and she becomes like pretty popular amongst the men, and she was not even a good stripper, so it's obvious that it was because she was light skinned, but no one says it but Mercedes. And when Mercedes says it, who is darker skinned, it's like she's a bitch. It's just I would like us to not play up on these tropes. Like, why do that? I don't get it. We're able to go into depth with queerness in the ways that I mentioned earlier in the video. Why can't we go in depth like this with colorism? Why can't we go in depth like this with the politics of beauty and how your skin color factors into that? Why can't we talk about why most of these women in this strip club are probably not light because it's a low budget strip club, right? Like, why are we not doing that? Why aren't we going deep there? I would like more of that. I want to see that. All in all, I really enjoyed this show. At the time of this recording, they have not released word of a season 3. They need to get that together because what the fuck? That's my show. Like, where's the show? The show's ratings went up like so much, and it's no announcement of a season 3, which is kind of wild to me, but you know, we will see what happens. I do have lots more to say, but I'm not really a fan of long videos, and this one is long enough. But if you have anything you want to say about P-Valley that I didn't discuss, about other things that happened in season 2, because season 2 had so much. The writers, chef kiss, how you do that? The writers, that's a writer's room. If you made it to the end of the video, that means, you know, we in community. You my people. So you might as well subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. I want to give this opportunity to say thank you to my patrons. You are why I'm able to keep doing these videos. Become a patron and you can get first looks at my videos. You get to see them before they premiere on YouTube. I also have an exclusive podcast on Patreon and other exclusives. So join my Patreon. Remember that you are enough. You're a baddie. You're a bad bitch. And I will see you in the next one.